Greetings and welcome back to Room 303, AP English, our World of Ideas lectures. We are now in the last essay of Unit 7 of the Jacobus volume, the unit called Faith. We're working now lecture number 44. This is Martin Buber's I and Thou, first published in German in 1923. Maybe one of the more demanding readings of the Jacobus volume, and so I'll kind of set you up for it in that regards. Now, our assumptions is that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net up through lecture 43. We also mentioned the importance of Buber in the lectures on T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets, if you want to go back and take a look at that in the senior AP folder as well on LearnStrong. Of course, we assume that you know our learning theory, the desire to connect new information to old information in meaningful ways. We do that through our active reading annotative approach. And of course, we're expecting to do that by answering 3 guiding questions. At level 1, what does the text say? At level 2, what does the text mean? Finally, at level 3, how can I relate to this information in some meaningful way? My hope is that you'll try and read this on your own and then come to a study of this with me. Now, our dates, let's do some real brief background information here. Our dates, 1878 to 1965. Buber was born in Vienna, educated by his brilliant grandfather, and then he himself, brilliant child that went on to become a scholar at the U of Vienna. He wrote his PhD on mysticism and would spend most of his life devoted to the study of mysticism. Of course, our study of Teresa of Avila in our study prior 2 lectures ago helps us with this understanding of mysticism. The personal experience of the divine or God was very central to Buber's life, especially Hasidism. He really pretty much created the renewed interest in Hasidism in Jewish mysticism. Because of Hitler in 1938, he has to move from Germany to Jerusalem, takes a position at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Note just Jacobus's respect, right, for Buber in terms of the number of words that he provides us with for the introductory materials. I wish I could read all of it because Jacobus's treatment is brilliant, but I'll just read a bit of it on 662. He says, I and Thou, Buber's best-known work published in Germany in 23, was translated into English first in 37, and then again later by Kaufmann in 1970. In 57, Buber made some important revisions of the text which appear in Kaufmann's translation. Buber's work has been often compared to the philosophy of existentialism, of which Kaufmann is a special student. One of the most important philosophical influences on Buber was Friedrich Nietzsche. Of course, in our previous lecture, we worked with Apollonianism, Dionysianism, also regarded as an early existentialist thinker. According to existentialism, individuals are not measured by an essential nature. We're not essentially thieves, saints, sinners, or hypocrites, but measured by what it is that we do. In other words, our existence, the way we choose to live, establishes who we are, and one of the purposes of life is to actualize oneself, to achieve our fullest potential through action. Buber puts it in religious perspective when he says in paragraph 24, quote, the unification of the soul occurs in lived actuality, end quote. Therefore, our decisions are crucial and determine the character and quality of our life. To continue, the principle of faith developed in I and Thou is based especially on establishing relationships, right? The use of the term thou implies a profound level of reverence, we might say, right? On to the next point on page 662. Buber points out that even though loved ones sometimes can have an I-it relationship, their relationship with God is always an I-thou relationship. And then over to page 663, Buber will begin by noting that most people feel dependence when they think about their relationship with God. He surprises us, however, by expanding this idea beyond the individual's dependence on God to include God's need for the individual. He says, quote, that you need God more than anything, you know at all times in your heart, but don't you know also that God needs you in the fullness of His eternity? You, end quote, paragraph number 5. Of course, this is an arresting concept since the usual Judeo-Christian view is that God is self-sufficient. This emphasis on the concept of relationship appears to break with at least one aspect of tradition. His view is based on reasoning about why humanity would exist if God did not somehow need humanity. What would be the point? This is an interesting take on theodicy, and obviously one of the important notions of our Big Five, as we often will refer to it, right? the continuation of Jacobus's treatment will mention Plotinus as part of this discussion, one of the great thinkers of mysticism, right? Just to finish, Buber's emphasis throughout is on what he calls lived actuality. Paragraph 21. By living in relationship to others, we actualize ourselves. The strongest and deepest actuality is to be found where everything enters into activity, the whole human being without reserve, and the all-embracing God, the unified I and the boundless you, quote unquote, from paragraph 23. The lived actuality must take place in the world of experience, and it represents a mission on earth. As he says, quote, whoever goes forth in truth to the world goes forth to God, paragraph 38. Well, this is some compelling ideas that you'll encounter. Let's now study about the rhetoric that will be Buber's rhetoric. He will establish principles, as Jacobus points out on page 664, and then he will move to conclusions. Buber, will just read some of Jacobus. Buber writes in a tradition of mystical literature that does not attempt to absolute clarity of expression. The subject of faith often defies logic, Jacobus points out. Rational discourse does not necessarily move individuals toward faith. This paradox, which is present in many religious texts, is based on the conjunction of opposites. We think about Lao's Tao Te Ching, right? Opposites and the failure to resolve the resultant conflict. Buber mentions in paragraph 29 paradoxes of intuition, and insists that we learn to tolerate paradox and inform our feelings through faith in God. For this reason, he discusses the teachings of the Buddha, locating Buddha's position in desiring an annulment of suffering. We know about this from an earlier lecture. In the paragraph 28, Buber's view then is to push onward toward the you that he believes to be implicit in Buddha's philosophy. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and just summarize real quickly the work from Jacobus, I and Thou. Paragraph 1. Overemphasizing our feeling of dependence on God leads us to misunderstand the nature of the perfect relationship. Paragraphs 2, 3. Our feelings are changeable, relative, secondary to the essential fact of the relationship itself, the relationship between I and a you. Paragraph 4. In the pure relationship, you simultaneously feel totally dependent and totally free. Paragraph 5, 6. You need God. And this is the compelling argument from this reading. You need God, but God also needs you. Man wouldn't exist if God didn't need him. We offer ourselves to the Creator as helpers and companions. Paragraph 7. Prayer and sacrifice are the two means by which we establish relationship with God. Unlike prayer and sacrifice, magic does not entail relationship with God. Paragraph 8. If we regard the pure relationship as the one of total dependence, then we nullify our partner in the relationship and thereby nullify the relationship itself. Paragraph 9. We also nullify the relationship when the religious act becomes an immersion in the self. This immersion takes two forms. In the first form, the self, I, loses its individuality and merges totally with God, you. The two become one. In the second form, the self is seen as containing both the I and the you. The human and the divine are identical. Paragraphs 10 through 12. These two, quote-unquote, doctrines of immersion are illustrated in epigrams, one from the Gospel of John and one from the Upanishads. We know about the Upanishads from our study of the Bhagavad Gita, obviously. These epigrams follow diametrically opposed paths, both of which are discussed here. Paragraph 13. In the Gospel of John, some find evidence to support the first doctrine of immersion, of man and God becoming one. But this Gospel as a whole affirms that man and God are two partners in a relationship. Paragraphs 14 through 17. While it seems to verify the reality of immersion, mysticism describes only the feeling of unity within the duality of a relationship. There are, in fact, two experiences in which we can lose awareness of this duality. First, the soul itself within man can be concentrated into a unity. Second, we can experience the feeling of being transported away from the world into a unity with God. Paragraph 18. But the unity achieved in such an ecstatic experience is not, in fact, a true oneness. Rather, the relationship is felt so powerfully that the separate I and the you are forgotten, though never actually merged. Paragraphs 19 through 21. The other doctrine of immersion, that the self and the universe are one, seeks a unity of being that annihilates the self and reduces the actual world to mere illusion. Paragraphs 22 through 25. We choose to live in this world where the strongest actuality is found not in the pure abstract self, but in the whole living human being in active relationship with God. The self that annihilates the actual world in order to rise above it, annihilates its own actuality. Paragraph 26 through 28. The Buddha refuses to assert whether unity and salvation exist. Indeed, we cannot make assertions about such ultimate truths. Rather, Buber says, we must confront them as mystery. The Buddha teaches that there is a way toward a goal, and in this we can follow him, but we cannot accept his goal, escape from the reoccurrent cycle of rebirth. We do not know if there is reoccurrence. Even if we did know, we would not try to escape from the reoccurrence, but would choose to live fully in every existence given to us. By the way, Nietzsche's eternal reoccurrence, which we talk about in our study of both Dante and Goethe's Faust, come to mind here. Paragraphs 29 through 31. For the Buddha, the world is deceptive, an illusion, Maya. But for us, it is reliable. Like the Buddha, we seek unification of the soul, but unlike him, we seek to bring the unified soul into relationship, you saying. The Buddha knows you saying, but he does not teach it. His followers, however, have done so, Buber argues. Paragraphs 32 through 36. All doctrines of immersion are based on the fallacy that the spirit is fully contained within the individual rather than in the individual's relationship with what he is not. The Buddha proclaims that the individual contains all the world as well as the origin and the annulment of the world. While the world is in me as a notion, in a more profound sense, I am detached from the world and the world is detached from me. Paragraphs 37 through 39. The origin and annulment of the world are neither in nor outside of me, but are connected with me. The world does not depend on whether I affirm or negate it within my soul. Rather, I influence the world by living actuality in it. Living in this world leads us to God. God embraces the universe and myself. Because of this, I and all people can say, you entering into a relationship with God. Ergo, I and thou. Okay, so that's the reading. Let's work now at level 2 and level 3. The big five. Epistemologically, what is the suggestion here about knowledge? An absolutist position? I don't think so. It's certainly not a relativist position. It's clearly more of a fallibilist position for Buber. I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. His willingness to be wrong is foundational to the mysticism of which he speaks. Ontologically, what is going on here? Well, we are God's children and we long for a relationship. Whether we believe in God or not, we still long for relationships, right? Psychologically, of course, the fear of the unknown can lead to anxiety, which of course leads us to worship and surrender. Sociologically, of course, this notion we're all somehow connected in our longing for relationships. And theodicy, well, why is there pain and suffering? A lack of relationships. This is a really interesting idea. The reason that most of the time we don't have such great lives is that our relationships are bad. At 2A, messages, well, obviously, this argument that God needs us as much as we need God is a pretty radical one. And of course, this notion that we all somehow have spiritual needs and therefore are connected, powerful. At 2B, rhetoric, obviously this is some compelling language and the paradoxes are a big part of that. At 3A, well, we could mention Plato, we could obviously mention all of the previous texts in Unit 7. I want to mention as well the Cloud of Unknowing. It's a text of mysticism, Christian mysticism, that you may want to take a look at. Finally, at 3B, relating to ourselves, what's the most powerful experience that you ever had? Would you qualify it as an experience of the divine, or would you qualify it as something else? And finally, do you think life is about seeking powerful experiences and then trying to understand those powerful experiences? If you're a ball player, think about how much it matters to you that you have these profound experiences, especially during competition, right? Well, there you go, an introduction to Martin Buber. I hope you'll go on to read more of his work. Thank you.